Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, your host, and this is another Innovator interview. We're pleased to be joined today by Sean Daoud, who is with Pacific Northwest PNW Metal Recycling Incorporated, and he's based in Portland, Oregon. Sean is a member of ISRI, the Institute for Scrap Recycling Industries, which we are also a member of, and we want to talk today about careers in recycling. So welcome to the show, Sean. How are you?
I'm great, Mitch. Thank you for having me. How are you?
Oh, doing great. Now, you are working at PNW Metal Recycling. Tell us about your job. I mean, what do you do on a daily basis? What's your role?
Well, so PNW it's a family business, and I'm one of the shareholders of it, and I'm more of at the executive level. So my responsibilities can change day to day. Some days I'm working in the yards, helping run equipment. We have multiple yards throughout the Oregon and Washington states. Or buying material from local dealers, and other days I'm meeting with consumers or local legislators. Mm-hmm. So it kind of changes, from day to day, obviously. And some of the things that I try to focus on a day-to-day basis is how we're shaping the future of the business, what opportunities are out there for us to stay strong, and culture we are creating with our team. What is our access to money for growth? Mm-hmm. It's about making sure the decades of strong operating history our parents created continues for decades to come.
Now, you actually grew up in the industry and worked after high school in the yard. Do you feel that kind of experience is essential to becoming an executive in this business, or is it something that anybody with a passion for recycling can do?
It's not necessarily essential, but it obviously can be very helpful. Anyone can be successful if they're passionate about it, regardless of what industry they want to go into. For the recycling industry, you need to know how it works from the bottom up. So you can't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Mm-hmm. Take the initiative to learn. There's not a wrong question to ask, obviously. Remove any ego you might have about the position you hold. Don't be afraid to fail and, learn something new every day. So obviously, starting at the bottom isn't necessarily the most critical thing to do. However, it does help for you to grow and expand within the company.
So if somebody's coming out of school with a BA and you got yours in human resources management, what would you give them advice? What advice would you give them about how to enter the recycling industry as a grad?
Well, I personally, and I think also a belief that we have at PNW is, we want fresh minds, and a lot of recycling companies want the same thing, and that's a great opportunity for any college graduate. Mm-hmm. There's lots of job opportunities, whether it's engineering, human resources, management, study of metals, environmental science. Within our industry, your start may not be in an office setting or at a management role just because you have a college degree. However, that being said, recycling jobs, they pay well, have great benefits, and most companies will reward loyalty and longevity. So my advice would be to not necessarily worry about the dollar today and be more worried about how you're building your reputation, because your name is the most valuable commodity that you have, and it can take you more places than your job title.
That's great advice, and it's cultivating the relationships and the knowledge. So let's talk a moment. You mentioned buying metal from various vendors around the Portland and Southwest Washington area. Recycling, a lot of people think of this as something that just gets done, but in fact, there are deep economic imperatives. So what are the big trends in the industry in terms, we've heard about the end of Chinese importation of recycled goods and so forth as affecting what's going on. But what do you need to do on a day-to-day basis? And I know the answer is pretty simple. It's we have to make money in order for the business to continue to operate. So what is involved in finding and growing that business?
That's a good question. And it probably could give a complex answer. With what we focus on every day is how can we find efficiencies internally to better handle the inflow and outflow of the materials that we want to sell, right? We're handling commodities. And so, the big focus for us is educating our supplier base of the trends that are happening internationally, because not everybody has their thumb on it. We have to abide by regulations, not only domestically, but internationally as well. Mm-hmm. And trying to keep up with those trends to support our consumers is a huge part of the relationship building process that we go through every day. Who are the local suppliers of metals that we can go to? What kind of metals are they generating? What volumes are there available? What competition do we have to deal with locally? Anyone that's in this business or in this landscape is thinking about some of those key things every single day. And how do you bridge that gap? It's a hard balance, but it's also a good balance. Part of why we exist is to handle these materials, but also to educate and make sure that what's coming to us is in a form that we can handle efficiently and effectively.
Yeah, the first time I went to an ISRI conference and heard people talking in terms of container loads and tons, it really struck me because the consumer at the edge of the network is handing over pounds of materials, but it's about aggregating all this. So you're collecting metals from a lot of different sources, and then you're processing. What do you do with the metal when you're done with it? Who's your customer?
Would be steel mills, metal smelters, the final home of any type of recyclable commodity. So it's the place where it's going to be, remade into new form, whether it's being melted down, re-rolled, what have you. There's lots of different ways that you can reuse and recycle materials. And so those are our final homes, the final destinations, pretty much.
And would you say that one of the things that over the next decade or two is going to be critical for recycling is a lot more innovation and invention? As you mentioned engineering earlier, and engineers, of course, design machines to make stuff. And we're talking about an environment where we still only recycle about 34% of the stuff in the United States. Do we need a lot of invention and breakthrough thinking in order to get to 50, 60, 70, or 80% recycling?
Of course. And a lot of that's going to have to be done on the front end of meeting with producers of these type of goods to make sure that they can be in a recyclable form.
Right.
Innovation is critical for our business, and we've seen a lot of change in the last 10 years. The landscape, the business landscape in general changes every single day, every year, and you have to kind of be flexible and nimble to be able to deal with that. But educated individuals that can come in and help with that, like I was saying, fresh ideas, that's what we need. And there are lots of schools now on the college level that are looking into that. ISRI has funded some of those projects at different universities. We've seen, give you an example on the shredding side. You shred this material, and you're bringing it down to smaller forms to better handle. There's magnetic sortation, but there's also electromagnetic sortation. There's X-ray sortation. There is density sortation. There's air sortation. There's color sortation. There's so many different ways to pull these commodities out of that stream, and that obviously comes through innovation and design.
So it sounds like this is a place where disruption from within various organizations is probably going to reshape the environment pretty substantially over the next decade.
And it certainly has, and will continue to.
So now let's talk about your involvement with ISRI. You're vice president, I believe, of the Pacific Northwest chapter, and you've participated in standing up and running conferences to get people together. And as you've pointed out already, this is business as usual in the sense that you have to be able to network and develop relationships. Why is it important for a recycling professional to get involved in a professional group like ISRI?
Well, many local networking organizations like a Rotary Club or a city business group will have a diverse group of companies, but it may not have a core group of recyclers. You can learn a lot of applicable information and make great connections to help your business at these local levels, but it may not be enough to get you or your business to the next level. Attending ISRI functions and volunteering for ISRI has helped me create an international network of amazing people and companies, which I or my colleagues can interact with at any level. Many of our partners and coworkers are involved at some level with ISRI and have tremendously benefited from what ISRI has to offer: safety, operations, equipment, sales, purchasing, and so on. It has helped accelerate my career and also has helped get PNW metal recycling to the next level. So being involved with ISRI, and if you're in the recycling industry, in my personal and humble opinion, is 100% necessity.
Were you able to get involved during your college years?
Yeah, I became the membership chair for the Pacific Northwest chapter when I was a junior in college.
Wow.
And shortly after graduating college, I became the chapter secretary and have moved my way up through the rankings. Mm-hmm. And it's local members that help get you involved. It was a good friend of mine, unfortunately he's no longer with us, but I knew him since I was a kid, and he was a good friend of my father's. while he was coming up in the business, got my father involved with ISRI. And it's that kind of support, that kind of, I would say, nudge that we need to see from kind of the generation that's currently leading, or some of the past leaders that are still around trying to help influence. Need to, kind of give that nudge to the younger generation, saying, hey, get involved.
Right.
Go out there, learn, have your opinion be heard. Don't be afraid to extend out and try to, redevelop yourself or develop yourself, or add a new trait through going to ISRI events.
So the diversity of experience is going to make you a more diverse, better thinker too. Yeah.
Now, 100%.
Now, as you've transitioned from working in the yard to the office, you've seen the entire spectrum of the work. What do you think the key things that one needs to know in order to be successful are when you go into recycling?
Well, operating efficiently and effectively is the key to success to any recycling business. It is where most of the time and money is spent because of the equipment and people processing goods or providing a service. Luckily, I was able to apply the operational knowledge to the book knowledge I was obtaining during my first bachelor's degree early on in my career. So understanding each position within the yard, as well as our office, has definitely helped create a better communication structure for decision-making and planning. A big disconnect can happen between the yard and the office staff at times, but trying to bridge that gap can help lower mistakes that could happen, such as misgrading a load of material, or loading out an outbound truck with the wrong material, or even avoiding a safety accident because an issue was identified ahead of time. The cohesiveness of the yard and office are critical. Also, understanding the needs of the operations helps with better planning of capital expenditures, lowering costs, increasing morale, and a lot more benefit.
So you're describing a very common environment, one where teamwork is becoming increasingly more important, where the sharing of ideas and collaboration, even across different levels in the organization, are starting to break down some of the old ways we thought about, working in the office versus working in the yard. You actually have the ability to be pretty fluid moving between those two parts of the business, it sounds like. Do you think people working in the yard, their ideas, are they becoming more critical to the overall performance of the company?
By far. Without the input from the yard, the operations teams, we can't understand how to sell in terms of volumes, insert commodity bases. We need to understand when we need to make capital expenditures, when is it too expensive to keep repairing the machine, when should we just buy a new one? Staffing in the yard, what are hours looking like? Understanding that part of the department of our business is critical for our success, and we have to have that open communication line, or else we, as owners or even as managers, can't support our supervisors or other team members. If we're not, cohesively operating, communicating openly with each other, we wouldn't be as successful as we are today. So, what you're saying, 100%.
So I'm curious, do you use a lot of tools, phone-based tools, or is it mostly people talking to people?
Everybody has in the yard a radio. So there's, radio communications. We're using email. We're using cell phones, daily reports that are completed by certain operators that are given to the managers to kind of track production of certain pieces of equipment, data tracking, whether it's on the scale for inflow, outflow. We use all sorts of types of analytics, but also, many types of spectrums of communication.
Again, a very modern workplace. I think a lot of people, when they drive by a yard, they see the piles of scrap, but they don't see what's connecting that scrap to the marketplace. And so this is really interesting. Now, let me ask you a couple of questions to reflect on the kinds of innovation you've seen since you started. Now, how has the industry changed since you were working in it at first in high school?
Dramatically. It's changed a lot, and a lot of those changes are almost kind of blurred. It still seems like I'm, running a loader on a Saturday morning over the weekend at times, but we definitely have more regulations to follow, not only in the U.S., but overseas, as I kind of mentioned earlier.
Right.
Product quality demand has increased dramatically, and recovery rates are being improved to a microscopic level, it seems like. The business, as I said before, the business landscape changes on a consistent basis now. And more than ever, our company has been keeping an eye open to changes coming up the pipeline. Our business, needs to stay nimble to change with the times. Investment in equipment and people are a critical component of what we've planned for and focus on. Having the right piece to handle flows in and out, but also the right people to know how to handle every situation. It definitely takes a family to run our business, and we have a pretty big, massive family to run this company.
So where do you see recycling going as you start planning for the 2020s? What do you think the major thrusts of innovation will be?
Personally, I think we should work on redefining the image of recycling. You kind of mentioned that people see it kind of as a dirty business, but it really isn't. And most of the public don't know what we do. We need to make sure the public understands all the benefits regarding recycling and our existence. It is a profitable business, but it also provides enormous benefits to the environment, such as energy savings and earth resource savings. Another push that we should probably see happen in 2020 and should have been long ago, but having a presence of more women in recycling. ISRI currently has a Women in Recycling Council to help with this initiative, but the companies within the industry also need to help with support this initiative. And this may not be something we can obtain in 2020. However, it's something for the long term, better recycling definitions to help differentiate us from other industries. As I said, we handle commodities and do everything we can to keep these materials from being thrown away. There's value to reusing these commodities, and we need better support from our government to help. Regulation, is a necessary thing, and we need to proactively work with our legislators to make sure we have a landscape we can operate fairly in.
So, across the board, citizens need to be more involved in the entire recycling process, cleaning the materials, making sure that they're well sorted and so forth, but also asking their cities and counties and states to put regulations in place that will be supportive of the industry and support the goals that all of us have to make it a cleaner, better world. This has been really interesting, Sean. Thank you very much for joining us. Any final thoughts you'd like to share?
I think we covered quite a bit, and just really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and I appreciate you thinking of the young leaders of ISRI and of our recycling industry, of getting our input and having us have a voice. It does definitely help the development of the people within our industry, when they can have relatable people that they can hear from, and so I just appreciate that big time.
Well, we're happy to do it. So we've been speaking with Sean Daoud, who is with PNW Metal Recycling Incorporated in Portland, Oregon, and also a member of ISRI, the Institute for Scrap Recycling Industries, as is Earth911. So thanks, everybody. We'll be back with another interview soon. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and this is Earth911.